Welcome to the Healthy Hustling Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Eric Broadworth, and today I've got Shirward Punches with me. He is the co-founder of Bridge Commercial Realty. He does commercial real estate and really specializes in healthcare and working with a lot of like physical therapists. And we have a really good conversation. If you are in healthcare or a physical therapist, chiropractor, anything like that in healthcare, and you're looking to grow, you're gonna want to listen to this because we're gonna go over Sherwood's experience in commercial real estate and really how that impacts like these commercial real estate deals, how they can be very beneficial and help you grow and expand your business, or could also be very detrimental and you could get yourself into a very big hole. Um, this is a super important topic that I don't think is talked about enough. I'm really excited to talk about this. Thanks for coming on, Sherwood.
Thank you, Dr. Broadworth. I appreciate being here.
Anything that I didn't hit on in the intro that you want me to hit on?
No, that was good. That was a good overview.
Cool. So let's get right into it. I guess let's give a little bit further background with you. How long have you been doing commercial real estate? What types of clients? I know you've worked with some very big physical therapy clients, and some people in the area. You've helped boost, help people just save, like very big companies save millions of dollars
Mhm.
on their leases and real estate and everything like that. Can you, I guess, just touch on that a little bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in real estate. I'm actually a fourth generation real estate investor. Actually, my great grandma, Margaret Punches, was one of the first licensed realtors here in Grand Rapids, where I'm located. And so I've been doing real estate pretty much my whole life. I mean, my dad owned rental properties. I mean, I've been helping fix those with my dad and my brothers from painting. So basically, the food I ate and the clothes that I wore were a product of real estate. So when I literally say I've been doing real estate nearly my whole life, that's pretty much what I've been doing. But I got in the commercial real estate world in 2016. I just always wanted to know what, knowing residential home is one thing, but understanding commercial buildings, like how do they lease that space? How do they build a building? What does that process look like? And so I was very intrigued by that. Being in the residential real estate, I wanted to understand the commercial world. So that's when I went into commercial real estate in 2016.
Okay, cool. Um, and so is like choosing the right location, how important is that for, say, a physical therapy practice, when you're talking with businesses? Can they choose any location? Like, for example, I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, right? Uh, does any location in Grand Rapids work because of Grand Rapids demographics, or does it make a difference to be on a certain corner or street or something like that? How important is that?
Yeah, isn't that phrase they say location, location, location? I mean, that's pretty crucial for a physical therapy clinic because you want to really focus on visibility and branding. A high traffic location can help increase brand awareness. A well-positioned clinic in a busy area, especially in a shopping district or even at a medical plaza, can draw in foot traffic and make the practice more visible to potential patients. So really, like you said, can you put a clinic anywhere? A lot of times there could be local regulations that have zoning restrictions, and you may not be able to practice at that building. So knowing where to start your clinic and where to like actually do the research in the area is very important. So yeah, so I think that's a choosing the right location is critical for a physical therapy practice.
And so you mentioned some of the key factors then for that physical therapist should consider when selecting a space. You mentioned like a shopping district or medical building that's already existing. Um, how does the location influence the growth of a potential clinic? Like, will it increase or impact growth by 5, 10, 20%, 50%? What kind of numbers are we looking at?
I don't really have the data as far as specific, percentage, but I do know having, like I mentioned earlier, visibility. If you're going to have physicians, hospitals, or other healthcare providers referring you patients, you want to be able to have those patients be able to find you, right? So does your building have any building signage? Are they able to easily locate you? Because, having a good location may help foster relationships with doctors who can recommend your services to patients, providing a stable referral pipeline. So I think that's a key factor is really close to your referral partners, having good visibility so that you can have the patients easily find you and locate where you're located.
Okay. Nice. And uh I guess can you give like any stories of people you've helped out and help find them a better location?
Yeah, I got several stories. I would say the one that I would say recently would been I have a good friend that was she actually started doing this all on her own. So she originally was looking for space and she said that she was hitting a lot of I would say roadblocks, right? Because she'd make these phone calls, people weren't calling her back, and she would try to like get access to these properties. So a lot of times when you're trying to do it on your own, it can be a lot of hurdles because one, I mean, these brokers are busy. They do take in a lot of calls, and so they may have a bunch of voicemails. And sure enough, they're probably pretty good at returning your calls. But there are times where, you're frustrated. You're like, I called that broker and he hasn't returned my call, and it's been a week and a half, and what's going on? So, knowing that experience with my friend, I told her like a lot of times, these brokers who list these properties for lease, they have to actually pre-screen their calls and say, is this a tenant? Is this a credit-worthy tenant, right? Is this tenant going to, satisfy my client, which is the landlord, on the type of tenant that's going to be in this building? So they definitely have to basically almost be like a gatekeeper to those deals. And so after having that experience, she told me that she wanted to work with me, and so I did. I helped her. I set up the tour with her. I showed her all the options, and I negotiated that deal, and she gave us a really great review. It's just knowing that process, she didn't have to handle that, didn't have to make the calls, didn't have to. They would call me back because of my experience in the market, as well as those people know my phone number, right? So like those landlords, those brokers, they understood, hey, if I'm calling, I mean business. And so there's a respect factor, if that makes any sense. So if you're
Makes
new and you're
total
trying to look
sense.
for, yeah, if you're totally looking for trying to look for a location, some people may not take you serious. And that's one of the examples that I referred to where she had a streamlined process by working with us.
So it sounds like that can be a pretty common mistake made is that someone tries to do it all themselves, right? And I think from a physical therapist standpoint, like if you're thinking about this too, like how many of your patients, if you're a PT again, um, try to rehab the injury themselves. They try to piece it together themselves and they're getting nowhere, right? I think
Hmm.
it's important to know where your expertise is and then leaning on others that, for example, you, Sherwood, where your expertise is in commercial real estate, that you're going to be able to like get me to my goal a lot quicker of finding this space that I'm looking for and helping me to avoid some of the pitfalls and things like that that can come with that. But what are some of the other common mistakes you would you say that therapists make when it comes to commercial real estate, finding a space and everything like that?
Yeah, I actually want to stress upon that, like I can do this on my own without any help. And then I want to kind of focus on that. I like to tell a story too in regards to that too, is, like you said, like a lot of people just try to do it themselves, right? Hey, I
Yep.
can do this. I can go and find this property. I can go drive the market. I actually had a doctor tell me that story. He said he actually tracked down his time. He said, I went and called on these buildings. I asked the brokers the information on the space, what's the lease rate? What are the options here? And he kept tracking them all down and he tracked his hours basically. And lo and behold, he said, I calculate about 40 hours of my own time doing this work. Had I known I had someone like you or somebody, a market expert, commercial real estate professional in the area, I would have absolutely hired you because a lot of times that misconception is if I hire a broker, you're going to cost me more in this deal. Does that make sense? Like a lot of people think, well, I got to pay for your service. It's just, you might be expensive for me and I just don't want to deal with that. But a lot of times, again, you have to verify this, but a lot of times the leases that are advertised with a broker and or landlord, but let's say with a broker that's representing a landlord, that fee is already factored into the deal. So that broker's fee, we say a tenant rep, and landlord rep. There's two sides of every transaction, right? So that landlord rep has already factored in the tenant's rep's fee into the deal typically on a lease. So they'll generally split that fee. So when you look at a building, you see it's listed for 22 bucks a square foot and you're doing this all on your own. Well, if there's no broker on your side, that landlord rep gets a double-sided commission, we like to say. They basically get the full amount if that's their agreement with the landlord. So a lot of times we say you are paying a fee, whether you like it or not, it's already factored into the deal. Why not hire representation to help you make sure you're getting the best deal possible?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. That those fees, are added in. And again, I think personally, I'm just one where I don't know if you've ever read the book Who Not How. And so finding those people who can just save you so much time and money, and really time is money. Like that person spending 40 hours trying to do this work himself, one, that's 40 hours of his own time. How much is his time worth? Like what is his dollar per hour rate where he could have then made it doing what he's an expert in? And then two, how much quicker, like it would have saved him a headache. So time, headache, and then how much quicker could you have gotten it done? So then you're really like doubling. Say you got it done in half the time. Well, it cost him 40 hours. And then if he had to work with you, that like, you know what I mean? I don't know. That is a ton of time and money that people don't really think. And there was and kind of funny story. So back when and this is a 20 like 22, we were expanding in our the original building that we're in.
Hmm.
And I'm putting in two new rooms we're in a CrossFit box, we're getting two more rooms, and I'm doing a decent amount of it, like I shouldn't say a decent amount, like I wanted to do the painting myself. I'm like, I can paint, right? I was going back and forth from like treating patients to then trying to paint these rooms. I look like a mess. One of the people who is like a patient and everything, and also a member at the gym, he's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, hire this out. Your time is so much more valuable. And I
Hmm.
ended up hiring it out because it ended up just taking like way longer than expected, just with how it was going. And sure enough, like a professional comes in, they get it done in like what was taking me days to do multiple coats and everything. They got it done in a fraction of the time. And yeah, it cost me money, but then I'm able to use that space so much quicker. It just I will not be doing it myself. I pretty much always hire that stuff out now. Um, because of that, because it's my time is valuable and I don't need to can I do it? Yes. Do I need to be doing it? No. If I don't enjoy it and I don't need to be doing it, then I'm gonna hire it out. So if I
Right.
enjoy it, that's one thing. Um, yeah, I think that's great. So, um, leasing versus buying, like what are the pros and cons? Do you recommend should people lease? Should they buy? Interest rates are crazy right now. What do you typically recommend?
Good question. So a lot of times when people ask that question is, I always ask themselves a question. What is your future transition going to look like? What is your exit strategy? What is your plan when you retire, right? So having that answer from the person kind of helped me kind of give the correct advice because, you know, if you're interested in purchasing, which is great, you have an opportunity to build equity, you're able to pay yourself rent, and more likely in 12 or so many years, you're able to pay that building off. Now you have an opportunity to cash flow that property and be a landlord if you decide to sell your practice and own the real estate, or if you decide to sell the investment real estate with the practice. So really asking that question first, what does your future transition plan look like? I mean, if you don't mind being a landlord, because think about it, what is it like to be a landlord? I mean, us as a family, we're four generation landlords. And would you want to in your retirement, time, do you want to be taking calls and being a property manager and dealing with that? So, or are you going to look at hiring that out, and will that property cash flow with a property manager? So there's, first off is what is your why? Like, yes, I like the idea of owning a commercial building. I like the thought of cash flowing the property and making it a part of my retirement, then absolutely. Then the pros and cons can, basically outweigh themselves based on what your, personal desires are for that outlook. So really understanding what is your, I guess, your plan, your future retirement plan is definitely a factor in how to determine whether you want to lease or buy. But there are definitely spreadsheets that can help you understand that. But it's really ultimately understanding, hey, what is your why in doing this?
Interesting. Do you think does it matter like if I want to exit in 5 years, does it make sense to buy then, or would it make more sense to lease? Is there typically like a time frame that you look at? Does it is playing a role?
Good question. Yeah, it's got to be the duration of the lease. So if you're going to retire in 5 years, you're not going to, and depending on your financing of that structure of that building, you may have a 7 year, 10 year note, right? So do you want to risk if you got a 5 year plan to exit to go buy a building that you're on a 10 year note, for example? So understanding the terms of your loan is one aspect, but also understanding if it is 5 year and you have a renewal option with that tenant with the new practice owner per se, what if they relocate, right? Are you willing to not have cash flow for 18 months? Because that's kind of on average. We like to say there's on average 18 months of vacancy in these spaces. If someone moves out, it's going to take you on average 18 months or more to refill that space. And are you capable of handling no cash flow in that scenario? So understanding those kind of concerns as well.
Those are things I did not realize and think about. 18 months would be a long time without any cash flow. That's for sure. But it's good to be aware of all that for sure. Because if you don't know all the pros and cons and you get caught with your tail between your legs, it can be very detrimental.
Hmm.
Um, so what would you say, like, what's typically your role or the role of a commercial realtor in finding like the perfect space? What does that look like, that whole
Okay.
process?
Yeah. So, ideally, first we always ask, like, who is your target patient? Like, what type of brand that you want and what type of practice are you looking to achieve? So, a lot of that revolves around demographics, like what type of income, what type of brand you want to focus on. If you want private pay, who are your referral partners that you are, receiving referrals from? So, that's a huge factor in that. And so, determining your brand as well as it could be, are you retail? Are you medical office, right? Do you want to have more high visibility and you want to be in the end cap of a retail space, or do you want to be somewhere like in that where you have drive-by traffic, walking traffic? So really understanding what type of brand are you want to be as your clinic, and then you do the market research. You find the properties in that region of the city or the area of the city that you're looking to open up a clinic, and you find the available properties that are actually available for lease. When you hire a broker who's I like to use that term a lot, is the local market expert, is because when you're a local market expert, right, typically you already have relationships with a lot of brokers there locally, right? You may know several that just do medical listings, right? Or even physical therapy clinic, former, PT location. They could be even chiropractic clinics, right? Those can be converted, right? So you may have relationships with people and you already have them in your pocket, like, oh yeah, I know this space that's coming up for is going to be emptying soon. My friend is a broker. He said this is going to be available. So you kind of a pipeline of available spaces that are not even on market. Like these are not even available for lease, but you just know that they're coming available. So
That's
so
huge. Like knowing those ones. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
so important.
Yeah, because those are like the times where you can get in a deal before it even hits the market. Because what is the issue with what is the issue when you have it on the market, and what are the advantages when it's off market, right? Well, the biggest advantage is that you're not competing. Generally, you're not competing with a lot of anybody else, right? If it's an off market property, there's very limited exposure to that. So now a lot of people are seeing that property. So you may be the only one looking at it and negotiating on that space. So it gives you sometimes very favorable, we call it favorable terms, because you're the only one, submitting, an LOI, letter of intent, for like 5 year or 10 year lease. So off-market deals are great because now you don't have to compete. It's when you start competing is when the emotions start rising. Like you really like this space and oh, it's just the perfect space. It's nice, but now you're competing with somebody else, and you may make decisions that you probably wouldn't have because now it's emotionally charged, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. When you let emotions get in the way, especially that with like business deals and you're not looking at everything from a dollars and cents perspective, you can definitely get burned. Oh, absolutely. So, I always have to check myself, I feel like, when it comes to those things. And I have people that I go to who I lean on, um, to help me make those decisions and make sure I don't make a dumb move that's going to cost me and that I can't afford to, write that check. That's extremely important. Um, do you have any, so I guess, so who's like your ideal person, like that's looking for a space? Who do you typically like to work with? Is it brand new business owners? Is it more, you know, seasoned people who've been in the game for a while? Like who do you typically find the most enjoyable to work with?
Oh, that's a good question. Personally, I like, if I have to be honest, I like the brand new startups because they're in that dreaming stage.
Really?
Yeah,
You
it's
like
like
the brand new startups?
I, I
I'm
do.
surprised you're saying that. I just not,
It's
and
a
there's nothing against that. I
yeah,
I at one point I would still say I'm a new startup, but continue, go ahead.
yeah. The reason I like that is because one, they're when you start with a brand new, they got this dream, right? This
Mhm.
vision. I have this goal. I have this dream. This is what I want. And I find startups to be very exciting. I do a lot of startups, right? It's because they've been passionate about doing something like that. Now they're finally doing it.
Pulling the trigger.
Yep, and that energy just gives you that you could it's like I don't know how do you call it, but it's contagious, right? It's a
Yeah.
contagious energy where you see them excited, you get excited, and all you want to do is win for them, right? Because this is a beginning of your future career shift, business opportunity, whatever, your dream. And so if I can help you achieve, by saving you time and money, and then the value of what I provide for you. I mean, the testimonials are like, they say, I would could never have done this without you, those kind of statement. Because truly, there's a lot of value when we streamline this, right?
Yeah.
And when you help them open up a successful clinic, I mean, for me, it's rewarding just to say, hey, I was there in the beginning with you, and this is now look at your growth now. So I really enjoy the stat like the beginning, starting that process when
I just know you've worked with some very big deals, some people who definitely, right, businesses that are not startups. Um, I love the energy that definitely entrepreneurs bring to the table, right? And chasing a dream. And I would consider myself one of those people. Like I am chasing a dream. I'm an entrepreneur. I got very big goals, high ambitions, and things like that. And it just makes it fun. Uh, I've worked with other entrepreneurs though, where I will say like what's frustrating about working with some startups and entrepreneurs is like they will try to, I think the most frustrating part is that they try to like do everything themselves and
Mhm.
not, you know what I mean? Where it's like, Sherward, you're a great guy, but I want to save a couple pennies and I'm going to try and go do this myself. And then they get burned, but then they don't learn from like their mistakes and
Mhm.
they keep trying to do that. So that is just I've done some like coaching and consulting and things like that. And just one thing that I'll find, it's like I'll recommend something. They're like, I want to do exactly what you're doing. I'll give them the advice, but with that comes a pretty big price tag. Like if you want my equipment, I invest in the best equipment. I'm investing a ton of money in equipment. And then they see it and they're like, well, I'm just gonna go with this stuff over here, which just like isn't as good, right? And I would say
Mhm.
from like the commercial real estate standpoint, it's like yeah, I'm gonna just do this by myself now that thanks for helping me. And then they end up like on a corner that doesn't work out well or outside of town, and then they're struggling, and like, or they end up with a bad like leasing agreement or deal. Um, so pros and cons, right? Like working with anyone, but I do think that the energy that they bring is very contagious. I love getting up every day and approaching the day with just knowing that, hey, my family, like counts on this. Like I got to put food on the table. And then even now by hiring employees, like I got to put food on their table.
Mhm.
Which yeah, it's just it's a lot of responsibility. It's fun, but yeah. How does so going into that, like as far as negotiating deals go, what should physical therapy business owners know about negotiating commercial leases or purchase agreements? Is there any big things to look out for?
Yeah, I think the main one is be the interior build out requirement. So I think that's one of the most overlooked part on the commercial deal is, yeah, there's one thing you can look at, you're focused on the lease rates, right? This is my budget, right? I can only afford this much per month. I need the lease to be this, this rate and this size of a square footage, because then you kind of pre-calculated your budget for your rent. But the rent is one thing. It is really the interior build that a lot of people overlook. All right. And why do I mention this? Is because in a physical therapy clinic, it's prob in the healthcare space. I like to say healthcare because in the healthcare, it's a variety of like from dental, veterinary, to physical therapy, chiropractic, you name it. In all healthcare, physical therapy clinics are probably one of the most affordable build outs. You can have an open space, rubberized flooring, several treatment rooms, as far as a build out, right? You're not having to do all this plumbing in multiple areas and rooms. You don't need gas lines, all these other things that are very
Yeah.
costly, right? In a healthcare space. And one of the things too in healthcare that I always emphasize too is t typically like these are like dentists, any medical practitioner that's, specialized. A lot of these healthcares they have basically in the banking world, they consider them they have less than 2% default rate. What that means is 98% of those healthcare providers are going to pay their loan, whether it's their practice loan, they're basically their loan. And so when you have a less than 2% default rate and you can communicate to the landlord, like this is a blue chip credit worthy tenant, landlords like to hear that. They like to know that this tenant is going to be here long term per se, and I don't have to deal with having to relist that space on the market and having to pay another broker fee and having to market that and have loss of revenue. So when you think about that and you communicate now, when I talk about the interior build out and you communicate to the landlord, hey, this is a healthcare tenant, right? This is a tenant that's going to have probably the most affordable build out. You basically gave two things to a landlord that they're very attracted, like, well, wow, well, I want this tenant in my building, right? Because they're gonna either I provide some tenant improvement allowance that we call tenant improvement allowance is the money that landlords are willing to provide to help you assist you in your interior build out. So landlords are willing to give a certain amount of tenant improvement allowance towards your build out. Sometimes if you're willing to pay for that build out, right, because it is, more affordable, then you can go and reduce the lease rate in conjunction. So there's a magic formula I like to call it where if you're not going to get TI, if the landlord's willing to give you TI, but you're not willing to take it, and would you rather have a lower lease rate? You can calculate that out.
Okay.
So what is your strategy? What is that? What is your why or what is the things that you're trying to achieve? And those are the two things. I want to either a lower lease rate and I want more tenant improvement allowance from landlord, or do you want or do you want to have higher tenant improvement allowance and higher lease rate? Like they kind of go in hand if they make sense. Tenant improvement allowance and lease rate can kind of reflect one another. Because if sometimes landlords say, yeah, I'm willing to give you $40 per square foot, but I have to roll that into your lease rate. Well, you're willing to pay a higher lease rate to get $40 per square foot in tenant improvement allowance.
That
So I
makes
would say the
sense.
interior build out, understanding that per deal and understanding the landlord's willingness, whether the landlord's willing to give more in TI or would rather to give you a reduction in lease rate and have you do the build out. That is one strategy you can kind of figure out what works best for you in that deal.
Okay. That's super helpful. That makes sense. Let's kind of touch on really quick, how can physical therapy business owners future-proof their real estate decisions? You've given a lot of tips, but are there any trends in commercial real estate that could impact these practices? in the coming years?
Yeah, so I would say one of the trends we're seeing is that office space lease rates have been going down. That's just, since COVID, a lot of people they like to say right sizing, their space. And so a lot of people are still working at home. So you're seeing, probably the most vacant spaces in the market is office spaces. So I always like to say, don't assume your lease rate. You may have negotiated an amazing deal 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you assume that, when coming renewal, you're still paying a below market rate. And the reason I share that with you, because I actually worked with a group that says we've negotiated a really amazing deal and we've been here for 15 years. And I just don't think there'll be, they assume that the market will show that their lease rate would be the most competitive because they did an amazing job in the beginning of that negotiation. And sure enough, when I updated the market and looked at available spaces that were, we call comparable, there were many in the market that were $2 to $3 less than the renewal rate. So knowing that, hey, the office space market is very competitive, so you may want to look at what your renewal options are and what you can do as far as updating the market. So a lot of people when they renew their lease, they just sign the dotted line, but you really should just look at what you're paying, talk to a broker and see what the options are in the marketplace, and then see, hey, you may be surprised. There might be a great relocation option, or your rate that you're paying is way above market, and now you need to go
You
back to the
come
landlord and
down.
say, "Yeah, we need to come down, or I am going to go and relocate." And I would say that's probably the advantage for a PT clinic is that it's more realistic for a PT clinic to relocate and do a 60 to 90 day build out versus some other tenant that has to do a lot more construction. When you
Yeah.
have less construction to do, landlords can say, "Oh yeah, I did this build out in 60 days." Like they can easily do this in a couple months. So just knowing, when your renewal notification period is, if it's 6 months, go look at the market, try to find what your options are, and then make sure that you are paying a fair rate or below, because you'd be surprised with this trend of office space lease rates are going down. I was surprised too to see a $2 to $3 competitive options, given today's times.
So I'm just curious in like the Grand Rapids area, what are you finding is like a competitive rate?
So in Grand Rapids, can depends on where it's at. If it's downtown, the Northwest,
Let's
so
say
like
downtown.
downtown. If you see probably a 19, I would say 15, but say so there's two types of leases that I focus on. It's either triple net leases or modified gross leases. Okay. Triple net leases is basically a base rent that you pay, but you have to pay an additional rent, right?
Right.
So if I combine those into say, so when I compare leases, I will say here's a triple net lease. So let's say it's $15 a square foot, and then the additional rent is $4 a square foot. That effective lease rate is $19 a square foot. And then a
Hmm.
modified gross lease is a combination of that too, but they may have other perks as well, like they pay for utilities and whatnot. So if given that type of scenario, right? I would say competitive in downtown market, if you had like a $19 modified gross lease rate or less, you're pretty competitive, like very competitive in downtown.
Okay. Yeah, I actually figured it'd be more than that downtown, to be honest. Um, but yeah, it also can depend, right, what street you're on downtown and that kind of
Yep.
thing too. Um, and you would know better than me. You're keeping track of all that stuff. So, do you have any final advice for, say, physical therapy business owners looking for real estate? And also, where can people, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, thanks. I would always say hire a commercial real estate professional who's a market expert in the area and actually knows healthcare real estate. Because if they know healthcare real estate, then they understand the concessions to ask for. Like I mentioned before, if you do healthcare real estate, you can communicate to the landlord, hey, this is a credit worthy tenant, this is a blue chip tenant, they have a less than 2% default rate, da 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 da. You basically can educate the landlord and say, you're going to want this tenant in your building, and you're going to want to provide this much tenant improvement allowance, this much free rent, this reduction in rate to attract them to come to your space. So hiring a commercial real estate professional who is a market expert in your area that understands healthcare real estate is crucial to because they're going to be able to save you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on a transaction, depending on the length of that term of the lease or how big of a space you're looking to lease from. So, like personally, I like to share a quick story. I helped, like you said, I used to help manage a large physical therapy, private equity portfolio real estate. And I remember doing that deal. The first 10 locations, I did a savings summary. Basically, here are all the first 10 locations that we helped you on lease renewals, de novos, basically new locations, relocations, all these typical, all 10 of them, right? And we had a total, and that savings combined was over $930,000.
Wow. On
So
10 locations,
on locate,
$930,000?
yeah,
So that's
930
93 grand per location, roughly.
on average if you combine that. So, like I said, this is very important to
Wow.
understanding the build out, understanding the concessions, understanding what to ask for from the landlord.
E-
Because you if you
Even
don't
if
know,
you're just like
no.
one, like just me, like for a single business, $93,000 back into your business,
Hmm.
that's insane. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's it. It definitely impacts your profitability, your future impact for growth, right? So
Oh, yeah. I
you
mean,
got money coming
huge.
back into your pocket.
That's a salary right there, at least, or whatever new equipment and investing, or even into your own pocket. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, like
Um,
when you don't hire a professional like that, like you just assume, oh, well, I have to pay for this bill. That, oh, the landlords probably only gave me a couple months of free rent. And you have all these assumptions. But when you hire a market expert in that area, they're like, I dealt with this landlord before. I actually did this deal and I know what to ask for from this landlord, or I've actually negotiated this on the space. My client didn't go there, but I already know the terms that they're willing to go for. So when you have a market expert in your area, they are doing 20 to 30 deals in the local area. They're doing healthcare. They know all the landlords are willing to give concessions. Some of these are sophisticated landlords. They're just used to dealing with, these types of brokers. So they're ready. Here's the term. Here's how much tenant improvement allowance I'm willing to give. Here's the free rent period, and boom, 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 boom. But if you're just going there and saying, "Hey, I'm a physical therapist. I want to lease this space," and like, okay, they're going to already know you may not know this information. So if you have somebody who is a market expert in healthcare, they're going to come to the landlord and say, "Hey, I already know what to ask for." And that's my last advice is hire a professional in the space.
that's awesome. Where can people get a hold of you that have questions? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, our website is bridgecommercialrealty.com. You can check us on our Facebook or Instagram page as well, Bridge Commercial Realty, and then you can connect me direct line at 616-930-0279. I actually do things national and on a local basis.
I was gonna say you are not just Grand Rapids, you are on a national basis, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep, we can transact all across the United States now. We have a team of brokers and we like to say local market experts in their area. We can definitely tie into the right people to work with.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to add before we finish here?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share these insights to your audience, and I appreciate the time to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, no, this has been super helpful. I'm excited for um I hope people found this as beneficial as I did. I definitely learned quite a bit. And I can't believe how much you can actually save by working, with the commercial realtor. That is absolutely huge. Or how much more you can pay if you don't. So
Mhm.
it definitely goes both ways, right? So thanks so much, Sherwood, and thanks everyone for listening. If you have any questions, please put in the comments below.